For this episode, we taught a workshop last week, right?
Yeah, we did.
Or last week and a half been teaching workshops.
Yeah.
Virtual professional developments.
Yeah.
And we had a whole list of things that teachers have asked for us to talk about and do in our future PDs. And I'm saying PDs because our Thursday releases are going to be like 20 minutes to half-hour professional development every Thursday.
Right.
And it's inspiring ideas for the classroom is what we've called them.
Yep.
And so some of them are, a lot of them have been teachers explaining things that they've done. But now the teachers are getting busier, getting ready for their classrooms, we're going to start integrating more of the professional development workshop stuff that we would oftentimes do in an actual professional development workshop. And so we're going to be giving that out and doing those, right?
We kind of like to think about it as if you were attending a conference, or I guess these days it would be a virtual conference, and you would go in and sit in on a session. Kind of these releases, these inspiring ideas for the classroom releases are sort of like sitting in on one of those sessions.
Yeah.
We want it to be short. We don't want to take up too much time. So we're thinking, 15 to 20 minutes weekly on Thursdays.
Yes. And we agreed because we sent it on video, so we didn't have a choice. I don't know which one of us agreed to this.
I
think it was you.
It was probably me. I'm too weak.
But we agreed for this one to do. They said is, we have our first unit is Nature of Science, and we're going to do scientific method. Could you help us out on there?
Could you help us? Do you have something for Nature of Science or scientific method or both? Well, there was a lot of other things in that, but we thought, okay, Nature of Science,
in the past,
scientific method.
we've taught lessons for that before, right?
Yeah.
But then we're like, Nature of Science, let's start there. Right. And we're like,
we look things up.
Yeah, we went. And so you start looking up, we're like, well, what exactly is Nature of Science? And we're both like, well, that's kind of the question, isn't it? What is it? How do we explain this?
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't tell you exactly what that. I'm like, wait a minute. And so we start looking it up. We read these definitions. They're like a book long.
So you know what I think we should do?
What?
Before we talk
Write a
about
book?
Nature of Science? Well, later. But before we... No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to write a book. But before we talk about Nature of Science, let's do that at the end. Let's talk about our other the scientific process, and then finish with what Nature of Science is.
You sure about that?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, it's a terrible idea, but I'm willing to do it.
Okay. Okay. We'll see how it works.
Fine. Jeez. Delete this one. All right, but our other things that Nature of Science, we're going to talk about scientific method. Right? So that means we're going to start with scientific method?
We're going to start with scientific method.
The scientific method.
The scientific method, no. And I think as teachers, we have to be mindful of this, that it's not just always going to be one scientific method. You're not always starting with making an observation and then asking your questions and then coming up with your method to collect your data. And then it's not a linear system. There are any of those points along that path, you could jump in there and start.
Could be an entry for it,
It
right?
could, yes.
Now, we have a clip from Daryl Granger.
Yes.
It's an audio clip. We're going to play that for you here in a second. And with that clip, he talks about the scientific method.
Scientific method.
Right?
He does.
And so it's going to be a short clip, a couple minutes, right?
Yeah, a couple minutes.
All right, so we're going to play that. I mean, around the world, you have people over the world you collaborate with.
Yeah.
I like the fact that where you say explain to someone, because I know I've been to some of the science conferences, GSA, AGU, and stuff, and you guys do sessions, poster sessions, or regular talks, where you're always explaining what you're researching to other people.
Right.
Why are they always doing that?
Well, so part of it is networking and figuring out what other people are doing. We're always looking for collaborations to figure out what somebody else is doing, so maybe you can work together with them, or you can learn their method and apply it to your problem. That's a lot of what we do. And it's, explaining how you're attacking this particular problem. And hopefully other people will want to talk to you and use your method.
Have you ever got to the point where you started to present and people asked you questions that made you then question yourself?
Oh, yes, absolutely. part of the whole process is getting these questions. And one of the very important skills that you have to have as a scientist is to recognize when you're wrong. And there is no shame in admitting that you're wrong. What we do as scientists is try to come up with an idea and then shoot it down as many ways as you can.
Wait, that's what you're trying to do?
Yeah,
Is it?
that's the scientific method is try to figure out, can this be wrong? Is there some way that this is wrong? And so we're always, usually in a friendly way, trying to shoot down each other's ideas.
Usually.
Like that.
But you always try to shoot down your own ideas too, and listen to other people's ideas, to other people who are suggesting maybe this isn't right. When we write papers, we have peer review, and the reviewers are always criticizing the work, and they're trying to poke holes in it as many ways as they can, and you come out stronger. If there's a problem, then you just admit it and move on and figure out why it was wrong, and you've made progress.
I like that.
Me too.
Yeah.
So,
There's no shame in science if you're wrong. You just admit it and move on.
I like that. All right, so with that clip, with that clip being in there, Daryl talked about, and that was what was so cool when he's talking about, he's saying, oh yeah, you come up with an idea. You come up with an idea, and then you try to shoot it down
Shoot it down as many on purpose.
I'm like, what? I thought you were trying to prove
No,
yourself.
you want to be right. But that's the
That's
thing.
not it.
You can never prove anything. You don't prove anything. You can
Only disprove.
only disprove.
But you can support your
Yes.
ideas, right?
You can.
And so when we do an investigation through science, we're finding more, we're supporting our ideas.
We are.
But we're still trying to disprove them and break them down. And that is so cool that he talked about that.
Well, and he makes a really great point that in that process, by trying to disprove them, you're making that science stronger. That process that you're using, it's stronger. It's going to weed out the weaker claims that you're making, and
Yeah.
it's going to really strengthen the underlying science behind it.
And if you think about it, I mean, life is that way, not
is.
just science.
It is, yeah.
If you get a good idea, I want to come to you for it. I want to come to you and the other professional people in
Correct.
my circle. I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? And you guys are going to be like, well, that's a great idea because it's yours, Stephen.
You get that a lot.
Oh, you know, I can't help it. All right, maybe I don't. But so yeah, you bounce ideas off other people. Science works the same way. The idea behind science is The idea behind science is you are disproving. You're bound other people. It is a community thing. The scientific community will help disprove your ideas. They're gonna put it down.
Yeah,
They're
and
gonna
nice.
question it. They're gonna they're gonna try to get you to question things. They're gonna try to get you to question it because they're gonna try to poke holes in it so that your science is stronger. Because if we have an idea for, let's say, cure for cancer.
Okay.
Oh yeah, this is probably cure cancer. Cantal, and this probably cure cancer. And then you come and you're like, yeah, but it's also gonna kill the person. That's probably a good thought.
Yeah,
that
gotta
could be a
consider
hole
that.
in my idea.
Right.
I'm going to kill the
excellent
cancer
point.
cells, but I'll kill all the people,
All the people
too.
as well, yes.
And that's probably not what. Okay, maybe I need to stop and look at what.
Reevaluate.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, and that's important with anything we do, is coming up with that idea of refining and refining and refining until we can no longer disprove what we've come up with.
But I'm a teacher in a classroom. I've got to start somewhere.
Yes.
So how do I start somewhere and not make it a linear process?
Yes. Say if you have the old the posters in the classroom, if you have one of those old posters that says.
I think it is even wasn't a line, and
Yes,
it goes
that's what
down.
hypothesis, an arrow down. I can't remember what it is now. But if you have that, throw it away. Just go ahead and throw it away. Now, we were at GLOBE. GLOBE is Global Learning Observations to Benefit the Environment. It's international environmental education program. It's a really good program.
We were at their North American Regional
Yes.
meeting. North American
We're
Regional
a
meeting.
part of that program. We do a lot with it, and we enjoy and we think it's a really solid program.
Oh, yeah.
But one of the coolest things, to be honest, is we get so many really cool ideas
Oh, we do.
from
Yeah.
them, and we like that. Thanks.
It's a crowd of other professional development providers for educators,
Yeah.
and so it's a place where we go to learn new things and get ideas for teachers to share.
And we're at one of the North American regional meetings, like you mentioned, and Jessica Taylor had showed it. I can't remember how she presented it or she was just talking to us.
I think
don't
she just
remember.
pulled us aside and showed us what she had. I think, yeah, she was presenting on it, but she had a stack of them, and she
Yeah.
had an intern.
It's it's the science, the process. The process of science, not the scientific method, because we know there's not one method that everyone uses. I know it's like Daryl says that, and well, it's the scientific method, but what he's really saying there is that's just the way science works.
That's how it works, right?
Right? And so, but we really like that poster. We're going to put that up, like right in front of Sarah, maybe, on the video. No, don't want to block me.
That's exactly. I love this idea.
But Jessica shared this poster with us.
She did, and we'll provide the link in the video notes.
Yeah, we'll probably the link so you can pull it up and share it with students. You can print it off if you want. All right, so let's put that poster up and let's go a little deeper into this poster.
Okay.
All right. Now, you can start anywhere on the poster as we discussed. But we're in a classroom, right? And so we're going to have to start somewhere to help our students understand. And so we're going to, in our discussion, start with observing nature.
Yeah.
And we're going to stick with nature. Yes, it's a GLOBE program, environmental education program, and we're going to stick with that for the purpose of this. We can do this. We could observe physics. We can observe something falling off and try to investigate gravity if we want. But we're just going to stick with nature for now because it's something they're all familiar with. And so and I know you're like, oh, but some of my kids are remote. I can't take them all outside and look at something.
Well, you can't, but they've probably all seen the school that they've attended.
And so let's take a picture of it and post it in Class Dojo, Class Learning Management, whatever.
Learning management system.
And so post it in there. And boom, hey, have you guys noticed in front of the school, the grass and parking lot and all of the things going on there? Look at this picture. Now, we go on to the next, asking questions to develop a hypothesis. It says and develop a hypothesis, but I'm going to say to develop a hypothesis.
Okay.
Because questions come first, right?
Sure.
You got to question something. And so and that's where we have them right. When we do, and we're going to do another next week, we're going to release another one just on questioning. Because so many teachers are like, hey, Stephen, the kids will sit there and stare at me. They have troubles coming up with questions, come on. And so we're going to do a whole thing on that.
Yeah, that'll be next week or next week.
So if you need more help on that, that's coming. But for now, I'm saying just have them write down as many questions as they can about it, and then have them determine what questions that we came up with about this scene could we collect data on. So what can we do an investigation, right?
Right, because some of those questions are going to be able to be answered with one word.
Yes.
And that won't necessarily lend itself towards collecting data. So we really want to consider, and again, we'll talk more about it with our next release, but
we'll go into that more.
We want to weed through the questions where we could collect data.
And so let's look at have them pick a question that they can investigate, and then of course investigation was feasible.
That's exactly right.
Okay, and so we have to make sure we can't get the infrared spectra if we don't have something that does infrared spectrometry, right?
Right, yeah.
And so I know that was random. I was trying. I was desperate there.
That's good.
But I mean, we could do temperature if we have a thermometer. So woohoo! And so we can do percent cloud cover because we can look outside and estimate it. That's a GLOBE protocol, by the way. And so we have to make sure they have the technology and the time. We can't do something. Well, I wonder if every 20 years teachers, how much is, but we have, it has to be feasible within the time. And that time is predetermined by you,
Yes.
the teacher.
Yes.
You could do it in this, this has to be done, you have to collect data in one class period. Well, at that point, you're not collecting what's happening over time.
No.
You're collecting what's happening versus like the parking asphalt versus the grass,
Sure.
right?
At that moment.
And
Yeah.
things like that at that time, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's very doable.
It is.
It's
In fact,
doable.
we've done that. We've done a micro research project, this whole
Yeah.
process in one block, 1 2-hour block of
A
time.
block period. Yeah, so we had a block period to deal with the kids, and we've done this with groups. And so we know it's doable because you run through. All right, you have 5 minutes to write down as many questions you can. All right, let's look at our questions. Write down which of these questions can you get data from. What data is it? All right, you have 5 minutes to write that down. Go. You know, and
Then
it's,
you have maybe 10 minutes now to organize your data. So we've collected this data. Let's organize it in a way that you're going to be able to explain it to the rest of the group. Okay, go.
yeah, then it's go outside and collect the data. Go.
Yeah.
And so if you're doing this remotely, you're not necessarily doing it like that, and they'll have more time. And if you're doing it remotely, we can still do it as a group, right?
We can.
Because we can use I don't care if it's a doc, a Jamboard,
Right.
or whatever we have for our classroom learning or management. What's the words?
Well, it's learning management system,
Yeah.
but whatever your
Whatever
platforms
it
are
is.
that you're using.
You have things on there, and so let's say, because we use Google for a lot of things, right? So we'll say a Google Doc, and that picture is in there. And then each team has their own, or you can do it Google Slides. Each team has their own slide, and they have to all write questions, and they all have to put in what they could investigate. They could do this collaboratively remotely.
They can.
One might be there at 2 in the morning doing it. Yep, I see that. I see those come in all the time.
Yeah.
And one might be doing it at noon. And so that's fine. It works. It still works for remote learning. This works fine. And then, analyze, interpret the data after we get it. So now we have the data. You got to do something with it.
Right.
And so how does that data either support or refute your original question that you had and the hypothesis you had for that question? Because you came up with the question and you had some hypothesis for it.
Right.
So how does that do it? So you need to do something with that data to help support that. And some kids will make like graphs, and then if it's a snapshot, like we talked about a really quick thing, chances are they're just going to do a chart and they're going to say, okay, this supports it because, or this did not support it because. And so then construct explanations and evidence we see. And so the construct, that is, that's where they're thinking.
That's looking at the data and trying to, what I think kind of what we had just already said, is this data supporting
Yeah.
those original questions, or is it refuting those original questions or those original claims that we were trying to make?
And so
I think, and we had mentioned before, some of the best projects that we've seen end up coming out when the students get
Yeah.
data that they weren't expecting. They really strongly felt that they were going to see data that showed a certain thing, and it just didn't.
But those usually are really good projects.
They are.
Because they thought it would, and they really tried, and they were in it, and it didn't. And they're like, what do we do? Do we go redo it again? I'm like, well, you can collect more data if you want, but if there's time, or you have to explain why it didn't. And so now they're really thinking, they're bringing their understanding to a higher level. And that is awesome when that happens. We learn more from our failures than we do our successes.
Well, and I think it's important too when I know at least in the high school classroom when we've done similar projects like this, for them to get to that point and they think they've seen the data, and then they come to the teacher and want the teacher to explain it, and the teacher doesn't know, and to have that moment of realization that, oh my gosh, my teacher doesn't know everything. I think I know more than what my teacher knows. Just hitting that realization, and that, like you said, they're going farther, they're getting that deeper understanding because it's not what they expected it to be.
If you know or not, I don't tell. My kids could not decide if I was the dumbest person on earth or I was just a genius. They never knew. We'll just leave it at that. No comments necessary. And because I didn't, I'd be like, well, I'm not sure. What do you think? I need you to figure this out.
Right.
So I don't know. How am I supposed to know? I don't know everything. I just know when lunch is. But so And then communicating it is the last step. And communicating it, and Deborah Granger talked about that. That was a big part of what he talked about. It's important. That's what they do. That's what science does. They go through, they talk, they explain what they're doing, they communicate with people, and they get feedback from others. And so have students post that, require them to give, at least 3 other groups feedback as a part of their grade. Have that in your rubric. They have to get that feedback, and then students can revise and make their final project, final pitch or whatever. And we do that. We have students submit to Indiana Virtual Science Symposia.
Yes, we do.
And we give them feedback. Then they move on. They'll do, a lot of those students will do like the Globe Midwest.
The Midwest regional,
Because
just
we're in
where
the
we are.
Midwest. And so they'll do a Globe regional one with their projects. And so if you do, we'll explain that down the road
We will, yeah.
when we get all the dates ready for that too. But that's something your kids can do in virtually. But so
And then
let's come
communicating
back.
with their peers,
Okay.
right, might
Yep.
lead to more questions. And it might lead to their peers questioning why they chose the methods that they chose, and really get the kids kind of maybe even second guessing themselves or second guessing the data that they've collected. And going back now to ask or think of more questions. I know I would always end this with students when they would show their conclusion or have that, they always had to also talk about if they had more time, what would they ask next? What would they look at studying next? They
We
always had to have
require that, just so they keep thinking about it.
Right. And so
We
this
need to come
whole
back.
process, this is nature of science.
Yeah, that's right. So we got to come back to that nature
Yeah.
of science.
This is nature of science. This whole thing that we're asking these questions. We're planning out how we might collect data to answer some of these questions that we have. We're making a hypothesis based on what we're observing, and then thinking about the data that we'll collect. And then when the data isn't quite what we think it would be, then we're questioning again. We're going back and we're changing this whole process. And that's what we're calling it, right? This science process. That's nature of science.
So the nature of science is just kind of like how science works.
It is.
And it's a process, the questioning things and collecting data. It can go any direction. Sometimes you jump over and do more questions and go there. And
Sometimes you start at the conclusion. Sometimes you start when you're at a conference somewhere and you see someone presenting something, and that makes you think of a question that then you'll want to go and investigate. I mean, it could start anywhere.
so basically it's, what is I always say the nature of the beast. And so what is the nature of science? The nature of science is how it works, how things work in science, quite simply. And it's not linear. It's we're not even circular. It's very here, there, and everywhere as far as jumping in and out.
It's really kind of messy.
It's very messy. It's very messy.
And I think sometimes it's just, you have to be okay that it's messy, that eventually you're gonna work your way through it and make some sense out of the mess that it is.
Yes. Not messy like in my office, but messy as in you don't know necessarily where you're going to end up, and that's okay. That's okay. You're just trying to advance the understanding of humankind, and advance the understanding of you and your students, and that's all we're doing. We're trying to investigate the natural world. That's what science is. And so next week, look for the questioning.
Yep.
So we'll do a whole thing on questioning next week. Look for that one. If you have more questions for us and more, you want us to add some things to the list,
Right.
We'll gladly do that. Just holler at us, let us know, and let us know how we can help you, and let us know whatever. Sound good?
It sounds great. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for joining us. Hopefully we see you next week with our questioning.